Welcome to Taxpayer Alert. I'm Al Segalla. I'll be your moderator. I'm also president of the Calaveras County Taxpayer Association. And these shows are particularly aimed at the public and the taxpayers so we can better understand what's happening in government. And we always have exciting guests. We're careful not to invite people that are not exciting. And along those lines, we are honored to have Rebecca Callen, our auditor. And Rebecca's been with us before, and she's done a fantastic job. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, Rebecca, this is, I guess, your third time on Taxpayer Alert.
I think so.
And the taxpayers are much more aware of what's going on, thanks to you.
Thank you.
And I think when you ran for office, you talked about sunshine, and it seems that's what you've been doing. You've been trying to get the facts out to the people.
That's what I've been trying, for sure.
Now, what is your feeling looking back at your experience with the county? Some of the happy points and some of the things that are more challenging.
I think some of the good points is that we have become more and more transparent. When I took office, there were funds that were not discussed. So there was this misnomer of the county maybe hiding money. So the GASB 34, GASB is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, had several statements that the county needed to implement. And we continue to revisit those statements. So we have worked in my office very hard to make sure that we're pulling all of those funds out so that the public can see, the board can see, and can make better ideas and suggestions for our future. So that's been a really good thing that has also caused a lot of arguments, Teeter being one of them. And I knew that that was going to happen, but I felt that it was important to pull the covers off of Teeter and make sure that that was out there so that it could be discussed and be known, and determine what the purpose of that fund is supposed to be for. Some of the concerns that we've had is we just are a struggling county. We're a small county. And it seems like every time we start getting really sure of ourselves that we're finally coming out of this recession and things are going to start turning around.
Then we get the fire.
The fire happens, or there's always something that tends to happen. And we don't recover very well for that because we are very small. So we have a very small population. We are generally way behind the trends in the state in terms of economy recovered. And I think that's just because demographically we have, historically we've had a lot of second home owners up here, tourist destination. So we get hit when the economy, when the rest of the state is hit. We get hit a little bit harder than everybody else. So the fire did not help us. We were feeling pretty positive about the future of Calaveras County. We were seeing increases in property values, very excited about that, and then the fire happens.
One of the things that the Taxpayer Association is trying to do is to gather information for the purpose of finding out what could be done to prevent the fire, and then also what could be done to better work in fire and suppressing the fire, and also what could be done better in the recovery process. And it looks like there's a lot of items out there concerned. We need to get somebody that has some time to write this all up, and then this could be almost a blueprint for preventing this from happening in the future. If we're successful, we'll support a report like that.
Yes.
And I think that would be a good thing for the taxpayers to do.
Absolutely.
And also, I think the fires also affect our government departments, and you're probably acutely aware of that.
Yes. So, for my department, you would think, what does the auditor's office really have to do with the fire? And we have a lot to do now. Once the fire is out, there is the whole process of tracking all of this and getting all of our costs calculated and getting that information submitted to the state and federal sources. And we have to keep track of this information and submit it in their respective manner, on their forms, how they want us to submit it. So that's been very challenging for our county as well. So we did hire an extra hire employee who is helping us just with the Butte Fire. And I'm spending, today was the first day I did not spend my entire day working on the Butte Fire.
Oh, wow.
So generally, it's anywhere between 10 and, 8 and 10, 12 hours per day that I'm working on the Butte Fire in some respect, whether it's meetings with other departments or meetings with state or federal agencies, or if I'm just sitting in my office pouring through costs to try to see how we can recover some of those costs. We knew from day one, and I made this very clear since day one of the fire, that there would be a county share of cost. We knew best case scenario would be we would be on the hook for about 6.25%. The state would pick up a portion, and the federal government would pick up a portion. If the costs are not going to fall under the guidelines of the federal grant, then the state may pay for it. And if that's the case, then the state will pay 75% and the county has to pay 25%. But even with that, we're finding that there's costs that are not going to be covered under the federal grant or under the state grant. And in those cases, the county will be 100% on the hook for it.
Maybe law enforcement might be one of those.
Law enforcement we're finding coverage for. I think what we're experiencing is it was just really not a good time to have a fire. When it happened, we weren't expecting rain. So, we weren't totally sure if El Nino was really going to happen. It still hadn't rained. It was still, it's September. And it was still hot, and we thought, well, maybe it's not going to rain. The problem is the outcome of the fire is that it torched our ground and caused issues for potential flooding and debris flow. So a lot of our focus has been on that mitigation. And the federal and state government look at that flooding, even though we can look at it and say, well, if the vegetation had not burned off the ground, the water would have been able to go into the ground. The fact that the vegetation burned and we just have barren land, the water has nowhere to go, so it just runs off. So by default, it's the fire's fault for us having flooding. They don't look at it that way. They say that's a different incident. So therefore, all of the time and resources and money that we're spending to clean up the mud flows and the flooding issues that we've had, the sandbagging, all of those efforts are on our dime.
What happens to our reservoirs? Does that mean a lot of silt is going to go into reservoirs from this?
That's my understanding, and Public Works has definitely been out there looking at that, as well as the water districts have been looking at that. And that was one of the water district's main concerns about the very first week of the fire, is what was going to be running downstream.
Now, one of the things that the taxpayers are concerned about is understanding the budget. Now, I've looked at the budget, and my brain is too small. It's very difficult to understand. However, even though I'm not able to fully understand it, the county seems to be running very smoothly, and the departments seem to be working together. They're not working against each other, and so things are getting done that just amazes me.
Yeah.
And this has happened right on for the last several years.
Yeah, so that was another point that I wanted to make when I first took office, is I wanted the budget process to be a collaborative effort. I didn't want the auditor's office to be in charge of the budget. I didn't want administration to solely be in charge of the budget. It's a collaborative effort. Departments know their business better than anyone. Mm-hmm. They should. Yeah. And so I have no business telling a department how they should be running their department. None of us do. We all have our own specialty. But I'm there as a resource, that administration is there as a resource. So I felt it was very important to work with administration. We don't collude, but we collaborate. And so we make
So
sure.
there's no conspiracy?
There's no conspiracy.
Oh, okay.
And administration will look at it in a different way than I do. And so they will come up with what they're saying, going through the information that the departments submit, and I will look at it from a different perspective. And then we'll come together and compare. All three of us, the department, the administrative office, and my office, will come together and say, well, I noted these few items that I have concern with, or did you think about this, or what happens next year, or I read an article that there is potential legislation that is going to strip that revenue. Have you thought about that? Or I heard that there's a grant out there that we might be able to apply for. Have you looked at that? So we're there as a resource, good and bad news for a department, and then we work together and we come up with the end result. And the end result is this very lengthy document that can be overwhelming to read, but that format is what is required by the state controller. So I would love to say we could put it in a different format that makes it easier for the public to understand. Governmental budgeting and governmental finance is not private sector finance or budgeting. It would be much easier if it was.
Oh, you mean profit and loss?
Yes, it would be very easy, but that's not how it is. So we do have some guidelines and requirements that we have to follow under legislation. So that's how we put this document together. But it is an absolute collaborative effort. So we work very closely with the departments, and I'm on the phone all throughout the year with departments to say, I'm seeing something in your budget that I'm not. It's are you aware of this? Are you concerned with this? Can you tell me a little about that? And it's a lot of free-flowing information. I mean, no one's trying to hide anything, and we try to make sure that we catch issues before they're issues. So we're going into mid-year right now. Administration just sent out instructions to departments to have them look at their budget. Take a minute to look at your budget and figure out if you're on target. If you're not going to be on target, we need to know that right away.
Right. One of the things that is concerned to some people is that part of the money the county is dealing with is not in the budget. It's separate from the budget. And involves millions of dollars. I think there's maybe $10 million involved.
Yes, so
And
we
that's
have
teeter funds.
Teeter funds. We have the claims liability fund. We have a 27th payroll fund. We have a myriad of designated funds. We call them designated funds. And they're listed out in the CAFR. If anyone ever wants to...
What's a CAFR?
The CAFR is the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. It's on the county website. It's actually on the auditor's website under financial reports, and you'll see this year's, or last fiscal year's, the 2015 CAFR. And you can go to it. This entire report is on there. And if you are ever interested to know what is the list of designated funds that we have that are restricted or committed balances that may or may not be in the budget, it's on page 57 of last year's report.
Now, you remember that? Write down 57.
57. And so this goes through all of the funds that we have and what the restriction is. So there's two areas where we generally hear people say you're hiding money. One of them is the designated funds, which I have made a point to ensure that we're talking about those designated funds at every budget hearing. I want to make sure that the departments are aware that they have money that is available for them to spend. And we do bring these designated funds up when we're having those budget meetings with departments to say, hey, did you remember you have that $50,000 sitting there? And I realize it's restricted and you can only use it on this type of program, but are you considering doing that program this next year? Or you're doing that program, but you're not spending that money on it. So what is the reason for that? So we do remind departments when we're having meetings with them. But then there are funds that are restricted by the Board of Supervisors, and we discuss those funds with the board every budget hearing. And they come out throughout the entire year. And, you were talking about the $10 million. You've got the Teeter Fund.
All right, that's $7 million?
That's in last year's CAFR, it was $8.6 million as of June 30th, 15. We are projected to use quite a bit. So we're projecting we're going to land at about 6.9 million by June 30th of this year. $1.5 million we're going to put into technology projects. We had some major infrastructure issues with technology that we need to deal with.
Right.
If you can't get to the internet or you can't get your network going, then that computer that sits on your desk means literally nothing.
How can you add without a calculator?
Exactly. So those are some important infrastructure issues that we need to do. We did increase the general fund contribution, the annual contribution from $250,000 to $500,000. I thought that was important. That was a request that I made to administration. We're seeing the revenue in Teeter is stabilizing a little bit, so let's go ahead and revisit that and bring that up.
So that'll go into the budget?
That goes into the budget.
It's going to go into the budget. Okay, so that eliminates the
It eliminates a big portion of it.
Yeah.
Yes, and so, and then we had some stopgap funding. The stopgap funding is, we had expenditures in the total general fund that exceeded the revenue that we had. And we were looking at about, 700 and something thousand-ish dollars. So what we do is we just put a transfer in the budget, transfer in from Teeter. The remainder of the balance for Teeter, we don't put in the budget because we have no intention of spending it in this budget cycle. It's there for cash flow purposes.
Also emergency.
It's there that we can pull from it throughout the year if we said the fire.
Right.
We just went to the board in October, and we said we need to potentially draw on Teeter. Let's put the budget together right now. So the board approved a $673,000 draw from Teeter to come into this budget year. So, and that's pretty much where we're looking. If we have to come up with additional funds for the fire, is drawing from Teeter, because we only have, $1 million for contingency.
Right, that was the next question.
And we
should have more, shouldn't we? We should have 10%?
We should have a lot more. And I would say that if we had a lot more on contingency, we wouldn't be arguing so much about the budget, because we could potentially tighten up the budget a little bit more. But we don't have enough in contingency. When, if one of the complaints that I've heard is that, the other place that we could be hiding money is in the budget. And, maybe you're over budgeting insurance. And if you didn't over budget insurance, then we could use that money elsewhere in the budget. And that's true if that was in fact happening. But what we notice in a lot of departments is the budget is the budget, and then operations is operations. Right. And you have the intention to do what you're planning on doing. Right. And you can only budget as good as what you know at the time you put the budget together. Right. Insurance is the insurance for the entire county. It's our liability insurance, it's our workers' comp, it's our property claim insurance, it's our unemployment insurance, it's everything. And did we have a savings in insurance last fiscal year? Yes, to the tune of about $236,000. Does that mean that was a negligent over budget of insurance? No, because all you need is 2 claims liabilities, 2 claims to come against the county, large claims, and that's wiped out.
Oh, wow.
So, we also see where a department has every intention to have all of their positions filled, and they don't, or someone retires, or someone goes out on a leave. That creates salary savings. You have to remember
the sheriff's department.
And the sheriff's department, absolutely. Yeah. We're seeing that. We saw that in probation. We are seeing significant savings in the planning department. And why would you think that the planning department would have savings right now?
There's no projects going on.
Well, the general plan's not done. Okay. So we projected in the budget, and it's, when I say we, I mean planning. Yeah. Along with the auditor and the administration, with the understanding and the blessing from the Board of Supervisors, that the general plan may be completed during this budget year, and if that's the case, someone's going to sue. There's potentially going to be litigation, so we need to budget for that. Well, it's not done. So guess what's not going to happen this year? There's probably not going to be litigation that we're going to have to pay for. Probably going to have to pay for it next year or the year after that or the year after that.
Wow.
So you're trying to budget for things that may or may not happen this year. They're probably going to happen next year. So there is always savings in a budget. I would rather have savings in a budget than be over budget.
Yeah, and people not getting paid.
And people not getting paid. But in the terms of the general fund, our largest expense is salaries and benefits. So if you have difficulty hiring in our county, if you have difficulty hiring for a particular type of position, you're going to see significant salary savings because you just are really having a difficult time getting people in the door and retaining that staff. Does that mean that you're negligently over budgeting? No. It means that you have an operational issue that maybe we as a county can figure out how to help you get over that hurdle. But it wouldn't make sense for us to cut the sheriff's department because they have salary savings. If we can get the staffing stabilized up there, they're going to need that money.
What do you think the problem is? Why aren't they able to staff up? What's going on there?
Well, I think everybody in the state is hiring law enforcement. So if you're in competition with every law enforcement agency in the state of California,
But we got trees, we got
we do.
good fishing.
Yeah, but we don't pay like cities pay, and we're not going to pay like cities pay. That's just the reality. Cities have a lot more flexibility than counties do. Cities pay higher than counties do. So we do experience, that's always an issue. We've seen that in the probation department. We've seen that in public health. We've seen that across the board. It's always an issue if you have competing job classifications in other jurisdictions that may be paying more. Even though maybe our cost of living is less, maybe we have different perks than they do, sometimes it's hard to find people to come up here. The issue we're experiencing right now that I didn't even think of until someone had mentioned that it was a problem is the housing. So let's say you finally get that person to come in the door and you give them a job offer, there's nowhere for them to live here. So then what do you do? Is it going to be worth for them to commute? Is what we're paying going to be sufficient for what they're going to have to pay themselves to commute up here? So those are all things that are also not helping us right now. So even when we think we finally got it and said, okay, we've kind of worked out this rhythm, we've got a routine in place, we can finally start hiring these people, they can't find a place to rent. They're not in a position necessarily to be able to buy a home right now. And you yourself said you've sold every listing that you have.
Yeah.
So
I'm also a real estate broker.
Yes. So we have a problem with housing. Absolutely. And the fire did us no favors. So all of those families that were displaced because of the fire, well, they needed to find somewhere to live too. Yeah. And in addition, you have all of this cleanup that's going on, the hazardous debris removal on the private properties. Where do you think all of them are living? They're renting homes in our county. Right. And that is competing for homes for potential employees that we want to hire. So there's a lot of...
Have you heard any complaints of people not being able to find homes?
Yes.
Because I belong to the MLS and there seems to be a lot of them.
Yeah. Not in terms of renting. I mean, there's places to buy, but if you are an entry-level employee, you're probably not going to be able to afford the properties that we have in our county.
What would your target be for a healthy reserve fund for a county?
It should be about 3 months of expenditures. So depending on whatever that is. And so
well, what would it be now?
Right now, it would be, I'd have to look at it because it really depends on what our budget is for that particular period of time. But I would say, if you just had the reserve itself needs to be higher. We have 2.4 million and the general fund reserve is for emergencies only. That means it has to be a declared emergency, which we're in. But to give you an idea, this our initial estimate on what the fire is going to cost overall, just for our county, inclusive of we're going to get federal and state funding, is just under $12 million. We have $2.4 million in a reserve.
Now, if we...
It could take anywhere from 6 months to 18 months to get money from the federal and state government. So
that's another
if we had
issue.
to wait that long, we don't have sufficient money, even if we factor in the fact that we have teeter balance there,
Right.
to wade through that storm. So in terms of operating revenues, because we'd have to fish out in all of our capital expenditures and all of that, but we would still be looking at, you know, anywhere between $3 and $5 million for just a contingent.
Yeah,
Just a
okay,
contingent.
that's what it should be. It's like $5 million, and then we have $7 million in teeter.
Yes.
Maybe I think you were suggesting of getting teeter on the budget, and then the funds allocated.
Yeah.
Well, that would have the effect of freeing up other funds to go to reserve.
Yeah, so I think the discussion I'm going to have with the CAO, it's just between, you know, the fire and mid-year and everything that we've got going on. Her and I can't ever, you know, we're all both going in separate directions.
So is the sheriff, I understand.
Yes, exactly. We're all running around with chickens, you know, like chickens with their heads cut off. Is to look at teeter and come up with a strategic game plan for it, so that on an annual basis we can visit it and discuss what do we need to do with the teeter balance. It's a large balance, and I think that it's an argument every year because no one sees us doing anything with it. We can talk about what, you know, yes, it's for cash flow. It's so that the fire districts can borrow against it. It's so in case something happens. Well, that's what a contingent's for. That's what the general fund reserve is for. You know, that's what a long-term capital improvement project plan is for. So let's allocate those dollars where they need to go,
Right.
And have a plan for them.
Right.
And then the argument is gone.
Yeah.
There is no more argument because now they're earmarked. It's all been discussed. Everybody's agreed to it, and we move on.
Well, you know, you pretty well hit the nail on the head as to the direction we have to go. But if you had, and we have about a minute left, if you had a magic wand and you could do anything, even change state regulations, what would you do?
Well, for right now, if the state could understand that little rural Calaveras County is not like LA County.
Right.
You know, when they look at what the match is for this fire or on any grant, you know, LA County can afford, you know, much larger counties can afford a lot more than we can. But even, you know, when you have a $30,000 match, we look at each other like, where are we going to get $30,000? And it seems like a drop in the bucket to a large metropolitan county. It's nothing. But to us, it really is a material amount. And I think that that is hindering us. So if there could be some help from the state to understand rural counties need a little bit more leeway.
Looks
that
like
would be
we
great.
have a topic for another discussion. Rebecca, I'm so glad
Thank
you're
you.
here. And thank you for watching our Taxpayer Alert program. And stand by for our next program. It's going to be good.